And what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and as always, welcome back to the garage. As you can tell by the thumbnail, we got a lot going on today for my 2012 Chevy Sonic we got in the background. As you can see, I've already made my way into the project a little bit. I've taken off the front bumper. I will put a link up to my previous video which shows you in detail how to take off the front bumper, just so we can save some time today. But as you can see, we have boxes and boxes of parts. So to briefly go over what we're going to be doing today, there's going to be a lot going on. I'll probably break it up into two different videos just to kind of specify which video you're watching for which part you want to swap out. We're going to be swapping out the oil cooler itself. As far as if you have one of these 1.4 liter turbocharged Chevy Sonics, one big thing is they tend to leak oil from various different places, but it kind of goes hand in hand with the heat problem. But yeah, oil cooler, I'm actually leaking oil from the seals on that, so we're going to be swapping that out today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump on in and get started with this project. If you guys are watching from this video, you missed everything to get to this point as far as having the radiator and the radiator fan shroud out of the way, because I'm kind of doing two projects in one today. So if you want to jump back to that video, that'll tell you exactly how I took off the front bumper, took off some of the fan shrouds, the coolant tank, pretty much everything to get you to this point. You technically don't have to get to this level in order to access your oil cooler, but since I'm doing two projects in one, might as well get to this point, and then I have a lot more room to work with. So starting on today, we're gonna go ahead and take off the heat shield on your turbo manifold. So that's these two little screws here, and then there's one more down here on your compressor housing of the turbo. So go ahead and take that off first. Once you have that heat shield out the way, you're going to turn your attention to the oil feed line. You're going to need some slightly specialized tools here for this one. Right here, you're going to need a T45 Torx bit. And then over here on the side that's connected to your oil cooler, you're going to need what's called an E-Torx, which is pretty much just the female version of the Torx bit. This one specifically is a E10. So, yep, fits that guy down there. So you need E10 and a T45. So you'll go ahead and take these guys off. You remove your oil feed line. And there you go. Once you have your oil feed line, that's what it looks like. You got the line itself. You got your hollowed out bolt, which is where the oil goes through. You'll have two washers. You have one, you can actually kind of see it still there on the bolt. And you have the one that makes contact between the turbocharger and the feed line underneath on the bottom. So you're going to need to replace these and all the other O-rings. As you see on the other side, it had two small O-rings. So I actually will be putting links down below for all the tools I've used. Pretty much everything that I'm using in this video will be in a link form. And if you do purchase from my affiliated link, I do receive commission. And I do say thank you because it allows me to buy parts and do videos like the one today. Next up, we're going to need to remove the catalytic converter to gain access to some other bolts here in a bit. So the top part, you're going to undo this V-band 13mm bolt right here. So take this guy off. Go ahead and unplug your O2 sensor up here. We're going to go ahead and make our way up underneath the vehicle. We're going to take off the bolts holding on the catalytic converter to the S-pipe. Alright guys, now that we're up underneath, what you're going to need to undo are these three bolts right here. They're 13mm bolts. Definitely get you an impact, because without this, it would have been extremely difficult to get that guy out. Alright, got the V-band bolts undone. See if I can pop it off by hand. I'm probably going to actually have to use two hands so I don't drop it. So let me put the camera down, but then I'll take it off. One thing I want to point out that mine did not have is right here. You're supposed to have a nut which is holding the catalytic converter on with the bracket right here. Well, I didn't have one, but you're going to have to take that off too before your whole catalytic converter comes out. Next up, we're going to turn our attention to the oil cooler outlet hose. You can see back down there, a little worm gear clamp, which is connected to the thermostat housing. So we need to take that off and then disconnect the hose. Once you have that hose undone, as you can see, there's the opening right there. We're going to move on over to the other side. We're going to disconnect this one right here. This is the coolant return from the turbo. There's a clamp once again right here. This one, you're going to have to remove this bolt down here. Mine did not have a bolt, unfortunately, but nonetheless, you remove this bolt right here, undo this clamp, and then pull this hose from the oil cooler. We're going to turn our attention to this hose here up top. So there's a couple things we got to disconnect first. Let me bring you down a little bit further. Hopefully you guys can see. So down here, we're going to need to use a Torx bit to take off that little screw right there. That's actually going to be a T30 Torx bit. And then up here, it's held on by a bracket. Once again, back behind this hose, if you can see, that guy right there, you're going to need to use another E-Torx. And then that E-Torx guy for that one is actually a E12. So you're going to undo the bolts, the Torx bolt and the E-Torx bolt up here. And of course, last but not least, you'll undo this clamp up here at the top. Once you have that guy removed, you should be able to slowly wiggle out the hose. Just wiggle it very carefully and it'll come out. One thing to note is when you do undo that, put your coolant drain pan underneath that spot. As you can see right down there where it's dripping, there was still quite a bit of coolant inside the oil cooler itself. Alright, so we're about to make our way up underneath because there's one more bolt holding on this coolant hose back there, and it's actually up underneath here. So before we do that, you're going to take your oil pressure switch, just disconnect that right here on the edge of the oil cooler. That's simply it. Set that aside, get that out the way. So we made our way up underneath. It's going to be really hard to see. There's my E-socket, my E-Torx, and it's a 12, the E12 once again. But I had to use the E12, a foot long extension, 3/8 extension for my ratchet, and I had to fish it between the turbocharger outlet pipe, the little vacuum pipe, between the condenser hoses, and yeah, I had to fish it back in between there. But I was able to get to it, so now I'm gonna go ahead and take off that bolt. So I got that bolt removed. So next up, we're ready to take off the entire oil cooler. So what you gotta do, you got this bolt right here, you got that bolt right there. They're both E14 E-Torx bits. I'm gonna take my impact, make my way in there, and take off these two bolts. Remove the two bolts. So now I'm gonna go ahead and pull it off. There's two O-rings back there, oil seals, and remember that hose that goes all the way over there, that's still connected to it. So we're probably going to drop coolant and oil because this is your oil filter. So I have my little drain pan right underneath there. Definitely tied on there. There we go, it's coming free. There we go, got it. As you can see, decent amount of oil is coming out, and the last bit of the coolant is coming out. One thing I did want to note, I actually had to loosen up the turbo manifold. As you can see, I have one bolt left on there. I loosened up all the bolts, all 8 of them, and I had to move the manifold out probably about, I'd say, a 1/4 inch or so, and that gave me the clearance to pull the oil cooler out from that gap. And as you can see, it's an oily mess. This piece here is actually just kind of slid in to that hose, just like that. It's kind of weird, but there's an O-ring, slide it in. So that's how that's put together. Before I put this new one on, I'm gonna go ahead and clean up this engine, try to get as much of the oil residue off as I can, and then we'll get ready to start installing the oil cooler back in. There's your old oil cooler, and over here, here's our new oil cooler. This one actually already has a piece on there, but nonetheless, we got to first switch over the oil pressure switch, which is this guy right here. Technically, you have to torque that bad boy to 15 foot-pounds, but I don't have a socket long enough to reach over the top of that. So I'm just gonna tighten it good and tight, switch this guy over, and it's gonna go right here at the base of where the oil filter goes. And there you go, I got the oil switch over. Next up, we're gonna get ready to lube up the O-rings. This guy already comes with majority of the O-rings, but here's this kit that I purchased from online. It's a Dorman. There's your little part number there. This is a gasket kit for these Sonics. Comes with all kinds of different gaskets. As you can see here, this is for all the exhausts. You got another set of O-rings here that comes in the kit. That looks like actually this O-ring. I'll see which one looks better and feels better, but that's essentially that O-ring. This one, the big green one, I believe that's actually the one that connects the oil cooler to this portion of the housing. So that's what you got there. Then you got all kinds of silicone O-rings, and these go to various places actually. This one, another one, over on this side that goes to this hose inside this tube here. Last but not least, for your oil feed line, it has these two. So I went ahead and brought over the hoses that we removed earlier so we can swap over some new O-rings. So this is your oil feed line, as you can see, and here's your little bolt that it attaches to. I just took off the old seals, gaskets, washers, whatever you want to call them. The new oil seal kit comes with actually 2 sets. I'm not too sure where the other ones go. I'll probably go with the black ones, but I'm gonna double check the measurements, the thickness, see if there's any difference. I'm not too sure if there is. That's essentially what you're gonna use on the bolt. You'll slide one down, then you'll put your oil feed on, and then the last one will go on top, and that's what connects to the oil cooler later on. For this hose here, you got an O-ring down here at the bottom, so that's going to correspond to one of these O-rings. It's going to be one of the black ones there. Over here you have the coolant hose, the coolant outlet hose. You got another O-ring. That's going to be another one of these black ones in here. I'm going to measure these O-rings once I get them off. Try to get the O-ring that matches to the best size, to the best of my knowledge, and we'll get these guys ready to go back onto this and back into the car. Alright guys, back over at the car, there's a new oil cooler. I'm going to get the mating surfaces another good cleaning. I'm going to use some brake clean. I'm kind of do a soft run over with a razor just to make sure there's no debris on that sealing surface. And yeah, we'll get ready to install that guy. As you can see, I have my paper towel down there blocking the little oil cooler return. There's the O-ring. I put a little bit of clean oil on it just to make sure it goes in there nice and easy. It's time to push it back in, but I just did want to do a reminder. I had to loosen my whole turbo manifold. As you can see, it's loose because that top hose over there, it took some space, or it took some clearance to get it back around and out over the other side. So I'm gonna need 2 hands for this, but let me go ahead and give it a try. And I cleaned my sealing surfaces, which is this surface here, and then back in there, that little circular opening. Those are the 2 surfaces that we're gonna mate to with the oil cooler. Alright guys, so I got it in, but I had to take off this hose to kind of get it back there. This is the hose that kind of goes along the back side and comes out here. So I'll kind of stick that one in from the bottom, so I'll do that here in a second. But skipping forward a little bit, one thing I wanted to point out is this oil cooler I bought actually already had this feed pipe here, this shiny one going up to the top, which is connected here. So I just transferred the hose itself, which is this top piece, and yeah, so that skips a step, which means I don't have to tighten that bottom bolt. But just in case you guys don't have an oil cooler that has that piece on there, bottom bolt rather, you actually just got to torque that guy down to 89 inch-pounds. I already got my main bolts started by hand, so we're going to get these guys torqued down. You're going to put these 2 in on the bottom, and you can actually already put the 3rd one in, which goes right in there, and all those guys are going to be torqued to 15 foot-pounds. Oil cooler bolted in place, and all the 3 large bolts torqued down to 15 foot-pounds. I lifted up the car, was managed to get that last tube put into the oil cooler at the back. And then put that weird bolt with that foot-long extension over here. Put that weird bolt in and torque that guy also to 89 inch-pounds. Now, simply we're going to move on to the next part. Now you got your coolant line, which goes into the oil cooler. You just got to push the hose down, up, and on, just like that. And I'm going to move the clip up and clip that in place. Next up, we got to retighten your manifold back on. I already got all the screws or the nuts re-tightened by hand, or tightened up by hand. So you're going to tighten those guys down to 71 inch-pounds, and you're going to have to do a certain pattern. Alright guys, now that we got the manifold bolted back up, time to go ahead and put your oil feed line back into place. I'm actually going to feed it from this side back around and over, just like that. I'm going to move the paper towel, obviously, but make sure the surface is clean where the paper towel is at. I have the O-rings lubed, which are going to go right into that top hole right there, and then we'll bolt it down with the bolt that goes right there. You're going to have one of these washers at the bottom before you put the oil feed line, and then the bolt with the second washer is going to go over the top. So let me go ahead and get it in place, and I'll show you what it looks like. Alright, so before I tighten it all the way down, I want you to see that bolt. As you can see, there's the washer on the bottom, then you got the spherical surface of the oil feed line, got your washer up top, then you got your bolt. So this bolt is a large bolt, so you're going to torque this guy down to 22 foot-pounds, and then this little bolt right here, which holds this side in place, you're going to bolt that down to 89 inch-pounds. So that guy is now secured down and secured into place. So next up, before we forget, if you did loosen your charge pipe to take off your turbo like I did, just tighten your worm gear real quick, grab the catalytic converter, and we're going to get ready to install that guy back into place. So that gasket kit that we have comes with another gasket for both the lower side and the top side, your catalytic converter. So we'll go ahead and take off this old one. There you go. And we'll put that back into place. Bottom side, same thing. You go ahead and take off your gasket. So line it up with the old one. So it goes just like that. So on the top side, I went ahead and got the V-band put back on the exhaust manifold, the turbo manifold. Then I need two hands, but essentially you're simply just going to take your catalytic converter, put it back into place, slide the lip up over your lip here, and you'll tighten down on this bolt here till it's nice and snug. So I got the V-band on and tightened most of the way, not all the way, because I want to have a little bit of wiggle room down there at the bottom. So we'll make our way up underneath. Always want to start them by hand to make sure that you're not cross-threading. We'll go ahead and hit them with the impact, get them down, and then you're going to go ahead and torque these bolts down to 16 foot-pounds. Once you have that torque down, you'll go ahead and torque the V-band bolt. Make sure you are in place, which I am, but you'll go ahead and torque that V-band bolt down to 115 inch-pounds. Last but not least, all you got to do is take your little oil pressure switch indicator, clip that guy back in place, make sure it's lined up, just like that, and you're pretty much done swapping out your engine oil coolant. So as you guys can tell, we're not actually done with this project. Pretty much you have to reassemble everything. But like I said, since I'm doing two videos in one, this is a start point from where I can continue on with my radiator install, which is the other video. So jump back to that other video, and pretty much as soon as you start installing the radiator, which I'm about to do right now, that's pretty much where you continue off of. But as far as the oil cooler goes, you're done, ready to move on to the next part.